We're lucky enough to be joined by the newest head coach for the Chicago Bulls, former Oklahoma City head coach, former Florida Gator head coach, and a national champion, Billy Donovan. Kind enough to join us. Billy, thanks so much for the time. We're excited to have you.
No problem. It's great to be with you, and I'm excited.
We've had a couple of interactions in our past. One of my first games I ever did was an OKC game on Christmas against the Thunder, or against the Timberwolves 4 years ago now. So I think that was my first interaction with you, but we've had a chance to cross paths in the past. So we'll ask you some basketball questions. We'll ask you some personal questions. I know some Bulls fans are intrigued by your story, by your background, by your level of success. So we start with how you got to this point. Last 5 years with OKC, you have an opportunity here with the Chicago Bulls. How did that come about in your words?
Yeah, I've told the story at the press conference. I actually, after things finished with OKC, great people, had an unbelievable experience. But I was really, because of this pandemic, separated from my family for, more than, it was probably about 3.5 months. I did see him for a little bit, but we never knew when the season was going to start back. So when things finished up with OKC, I basically drove back to Florida, which is where my wife and 3 of my 4 children were at. And, while I was driving back, I was on the phone just wanting to call people in OKC and people that were so good to me to thank them. And then, right when I got home on Thursday, I got a call that, Arturas and Mark Eversley wanted to come in and sit down and speak on Friday. I was like, well, geez, I just got done driving 17 hours. I haven't seen my family. Can I at least get the weekend? So I ended up meeting with Arturas and Mark on Monday. We had started at 9 o'clock in the morning. It probably went all the way, maybe 2:30 in the afternoon. It was a great meeting. I really enjoyed spending time with both of them. I think the things that they talked about really resonated with me. Arturas and I had some follow-up questions for Arturas on Wednesday, and we got together on the phone and had another extensive conversation on Wednesday. And then I had a chance to spend time, on Zoom with Jerry and Michael Reinsdorf, and they were great. And I heard so many great things about them, and so many great things about Mark and Arturas, and just knowing about the history of the Bulls organization, the people that were there, and the way people talked about the Bulls organization. There just seemed like a lot of great things. And, I took the weekend just to talk to my family. And I told Arturas on, Sunday night that I was, ready to take the next step. And we got something done, I think, by Monday or Tuesday. And just excited it all worked out the way it did.
Whether it's something that you gathered during the process of speaking to both Arturas and Mark during the coaching search, if there was something that you already knew, there's something that you walked away with from those initial and successive interviews. What impressed you about these two gentlemen who have now stepped into this Bulls front office?
Well, I really, someone asked me yesterday, was I eyeing the Bulls job? I really wasn't eyeing any job. I mean, when I left OKC, my intention and my thought was that I was probably not going to coach this year, because I just didn't know, what the future looked like. And I was okay with that because we were so separated as a family with this pandemic, and it going all the way back to March. It's been difficult not only on myself and our family, it's been difficult in the entire country and the entire world. Everybody's been dealing with this, and it's really, really been challenging. So, the first thing Arturas said to me in the meeting, which really really hit me hard in a very positive way, is he said, I'm not necessarily looking for a basketball coach. I'm not looking for a player development coach. I'm not looking for this. I'm not looking for that. He says, I'm looking for a partner. I'm looking for somebody that I can work closely with, that we can look at this blank canvas we have in Chicago and help try to build things back up. And I know being at OKC for the last 5 years, the Bulls have had a lot of injuries, a lot of things with players have been challenging. They haven't had a full complement of roster of players, and we played them a few times and they were without a lot of players. So that was kind of a really, I think, a great way to start with me, because I do think that, with the dynamics of any organization in any kind of sports, whether it's even me being in college with the athletic department and the board of governors, or whoever it is that's, you're working with, the athletic department as a whole, you got to have partnership and you got to have people working together. And when he talked to me about that, that really resonated with me. I think the fact that, he felt like I could really help the group, as a coach, just based on the research that he had done on me as a coach. And I did some research on Arturas and Mark, and, everything came back incredibly positive, and people that I respect and people that I know well. And I thought it started off at that point, which was really powerful for me, that they were talking about wanting to have a partnership and working together closely with somebody. And that's kind of where it started, and it really escalated from there.
I know when I've had a chance to see your teams over the last 3 or 4 years, I've always walked away impressed with the level of defensive intensity they played with. I think you guys have, in OKC, finished top 10 in defensive rating 4 straight years. And I know you take a lot of pride in that, especially considering all the personnel you had shifting in and out over your years in OKC. So asking that, seeing the personnel that you've dealt with and a wide array of them in the NBA, what do you see from the current roster? If I just throw the roster in front of you and I say, hey, give me a sense of this personnel, what you can do with them defensively, and then maybe what you can do with them offensively, just from your kind of scouting eye, what do you see?
Yeah, and I'd like to, Adam, find out more watching film, but just,
Sure.
My experience going against the Bulls the last few years, I think you have to look at – I think you always have got to start off defensively, pick and roll coverage. That's what the NBA's turned into. It's a big pick and roll game. So you got to really think about how you're going to guard pick and roll. And I don't think you can guard pick and roll one way. You've got to guard it multiple ways. And then you've got to look at, I think, what kind of coverages can guys play in? What kind of coverages can guys really be effective in? And then I think the next step would be that is, okay, who are players that can switch? Do you have players that can switch and guard multiple positions? Because so much of what's happened in the NBA, and you watch in the playoffs now, because everybody's switching, everybody's playing two-way players and there's versatility, you're basically trying to create a situation where you get the best offensive player against a person that's the worst defensive player for the other team, and then you're trying to create from there. So, having two-way players is important, but you're not going to always have every single time for, the full length of a game, everybody being an elite defensive player. So now then the next part of that is pick and roll coverage, players that can switch, and then where is your help built in? Where are you building help? So I would probably need to watch more film, to see the flexibility of all those guys. I think Wendell Carter played, several different coverages for the Bulls while he's been there. Lowry's an interesting guy because he's got really good size. I think he can move his feet pretty well. I think, Kobe White, I think, Zach LaVine have ability. I think if you look at a guy like Otto Porter with his length, you look at Thaddeus Young, just as experienced as he is and as versatile as he is, I think you want to try to build it out from there. But inevitably, you're going to have to help each other. You're going to have to be in really good spots, and you're going to have to understand that, we all got to be accountable to each other on the court in terms of helping each other.
I just wanted to give fans a sense of kind of your X and O capability. I think that's something I've always walked away impressed every time we've had a chance to talk. I always learn something on the basketball side of things from you. Away from maybe the scouting eye of the personnel on the roster, you've said certain things about Zach LaVine. You've been impressed by him. Kobe White as well. There's obviously a young core in Chicago that people are excited about, but are looking for reasons for optimism for. I imagine your hiring is going to bring some of that optimism. What are you optimistic about when I say some of those names and you look at that roster? What are you optimistic about, maybe away from just the basketball stuff on the floor?
Well, I felt like playing against the Bulls in particular last year, and even maybe the year before that, is I felt like they were a competitive team. I felt like they played hard. I felt like they were competitive. I think that over 82 games, that's got to be your starting point. It's really, really hard to be successful and win when guys don't have maybe an internal competitive streak night in and night out. And, it's a lot for a player to get emotionally ready to play every night because you're playing so many games. So I always felt like watching the Bulls and preparing for the Bulls that they had a group that played hard. I think we talked a little bit earlier about maybe some of the injuries and things they had to endure over the last several years. But I think for me, that's really, really important is having guys that are going to be competitive. So I'm excited about that. I think you mentioned the fact that there's 4 younger players that maybe people are excited about. I think those guys have great futures and careers ahead of them. Zach's been in the league, obviously, longer than a couple of other guys. And I think you also look at a guy, leadership. Thaddeus Young has been on a lot of really good teams, and he's a unique player. And I've seen Thaddeus go all the way back to high school, Otto Porter, obviously, he's dealt with some injuries. I think, the veteran guys become really important in that as well, as you're looking at the team. And then, how do you get the group functioning well with one another and playing together and helping one another? I mean, those are going to be the things I think you're going to have to look at and try to evaluate.
We'll kind of take a few more steps towards the personal side of things. We obviously in Chicago are big fans of Joakim Noah and what he's contributed to the Bulls organization over his several years in the league. You're obviously very close with Joakim, having won a couple titles with him. Bradley Beal, somebody you're very close with, another Florida Gator. Chris Paul, you've obviously spent the last year coaching him. I bring up those names because all three of them have some level of clout depending on where you go in this country and who you're talking to. And they've all said very, very positive things about you. What does it mean to you to know that you've made a certain level of impact on guys over a long period of time? I imagine Bulls fans want to know a little bit about that side of you and that side of your relationships.
Yeah, listen, I've been very, very blessed and fortunate throughout my career to be around really not only great players, but great people. And I think sometimes people get lost. They look at these players, they see them on TV, they see them out there in the game, and they don't really maybe understand the humanistic standpoint, but they're all human. They're all human beings. They all have their own personal experiences. They all have their personal stories. And I think the biggest thing is, you're really trying to get to know them and get to know them as people. That's, I think, always a good starting place because yes, we all have a job to do. We understand how important the job is, but there's also other things outside all those guys' lives other than basketball. And, Chris Paul, you think about what he had to deal with this past year, president of Players Association, a pandemic, trying to help the league get back to playing, trying to use the platform in the bubble in Orlando to bring, some real, hopefully change in our country as it relates to social injustice. And seeing him work like that was really, really remarkable. And people don't get a chance to see that side of him, being around a Russell Westbrook and seeing his attention to detail and wanting to be in there early and trying to work and the struggle to keep pursuing and keep challenging himself and trying to get better and his ability to come ready to play and bring great energy. I don't think you ever want to take things for granted from what these guys do because it's so easy just to say, okay, this is the job, and you don't necessarily understand the human side of these guys. And I think what's happened is some of the players you mentioned, I've just been really, really fortunate to develop good relationships with all of them away from the game. That's the thing that I've enjoyed because, whenever our time together is ended, you're always going to reflect back on your relationship with your teammates. If I said to somebody, tell me what happened, when you were 14 years old on this day, they probably would be like, you know what? I don't know what I was doing that day. But if you said to them, who was your favorite teacher in elementary school? They probably can tell you exactly who the person is 25 or 30 years later. So I think for me, everything is always going to come down to the relationship piece. Does that mean you're going to see eye to eye? Does that mean that there's not going to be disagreements? Does that mean there's not going to be some confrontation? Absolutely not. If you're inside your own family, there's going to be disagreements and some confrontation, So I think that's part of it. But when you have a relationship and you know what both parties are trying to do and trying to get to, and it's built out of, a trust and an honesty and being able to speak candidly and open with one another, that's where I think you can start to really, really build some relationships when things get difficult. See, I think the relationship piece is most important when things get difficult, because when things get difficult, you have to understand where each party's coming from and what you want as the end result. You may think about there's a different way to go about doing it, which is fine, but the reality is you're going to have to partner and work together at some point.
I think a lot of people appreciate your valuing of team. I know a lot of people around the organization feel that way as well. I got a couple of questions here from social media, so I'm sure you're not going to sweat any bullets on this one. I promise you, but we'll keep it clean here. I'm not going to ask you the Chicago-style pizza or New York-style pizza question. Ian wanted me to ask you that. I'm not going to ask you that because there's a lot of nuance to this that you and I can hash out at a later date, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to do that. But is there a favorite pizza spot that you have?
In Chicago?
Anywhere. Feel free.
Well, just growing up in New York, there was like a pizza place on almost every corner. You could go get a slice of pizza. I'd have to say, like, the first time I went to Chicago and tried deep dish pizza, didn't really have that in New York. So I really, really enjoyed that. And obviously Chicago's famous for that. So I don't know if there was per se a specific pizza place. I forget the one that was in Lower Manhattan. There was a famous place I think we used to go every once in a while when we played at Madison Square Garden. I think it may have been Joe's or something like that. I maybe have the name wrong, but yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed pizza. Pizza's always great.
You and me will enjoy one of those at some point in the near future. Reggie Hansen, I believe you may know that name. Played for you while you were a GA at Kentucky in '89. Then obviously you became an assistant under Rick Pitino. He asks, what made you decide to get into coaching in the first place? And he would also like to note, this is positive for you. He used to break our ankles in practice, referring to your ball handling ability. So there's a compliment for you. But again, why'd you decide to get into coaching in the first place?
Reggie was a great guy. That was my first year ever in coaching. I think I was maybe 25 or 26 years old. Those guys, I was only a couple of years older than them. Reggie was a senior. He was a 6'7" center for us and did an unbelievable job. We were on probation at Kentucky at that time, and Reggie was kind of the heart and soul of that team and did a remarkable job. When I finished playing, I went down on Wall Street and I worked down on Wall Street. And it was really a great thing I did because I saw a different side, and I knew after about 6 or 8 months, there is no way I'm doing this the rest of my life. I missed basketball too much. I just missed being around the team. And at that point in time, Coach Pitino was the head coach of the Knicks. And I was working down on Wall Street, and I went over to a Knicks game, and I said to him, Coach, I'm not enjoying this. I think I want to get into coaching. He's like, oh, you're crazy. Just go back down to Wall Street. You'll be fine. It'll work out great for you. You don't want to get into coaching. And I said, no, I do. He says, no, you don't. Just think about it. And, I went back again a second time. And then obviously things finished up for him in New York, and then he took the Kentucky job. And then while he was, at Kentucky, I was able to come along as a graduate assistant, and that's where Reggie and I first met each other.
That's an awesome story. I would imagine that people on Wall Street, if you said, hey, I want to be a broker, they would probably tell you the same thing. They go, no, you don't want to do this. You don't want to get into this. It's funny that the coaching angle of it is the exact same.
Yes, that's right. It was a real incredible learning series. I had to get my Series 7 to be able to sell stocks. And I didn't even know what I was doing. I was going to the office. They would sit these note cards of like these different people around the country just to cold call. And they wanted me to like push a certain stock. I didn't even know what the stocks were. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable asking somebody for their money, and I don't even know, necessarily anything about this company I'm trying to push on them.
Right.
I work with some good guys. I like them, but it just wasn't for me. And you know what? Like, I'm happy I at least did that I got a chance to see that part or that side of business, and then obviously able to transfer over and to get into coaching.
Yeah, I think you're more Hoosiers than Boiler Room. I think is a fair assessment for you. I'll ask you one more from social media. I thought this was an interesting question. What's the most important part in developing young players, and how did you address that with guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who came over from Los Angeles to you, and somebody like a Lou Dort, who maybe just now during these playoffs is when people start to come around to the player that Lou Dort is, the kid out of Arizona State?
Well, I think people use the word player development, and it's such a huge, broad term, and it encompasses so many different things. I think the first thing that's got to start off is it's, in my opinion, it's on the player first and foremost. And what I mean by that is, how driven is that player to take care of his diet, take care of his sleeping habits, get into the weight room, utilize the resources that, all these organizations provide for players. How disciplined and detailed can they be in terms of really being intentional about trying to get better? If you've got a player like that and you have the resources and you're going to put the time in, that player is going to get better. They're going to get better. The two players you mentioned, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Lou Dort, they have that. I mean, Lou Dort was an undrafted player, was in the G League, and we had a couple of injuries, and next thing you know, he's in our rotation, and he took full advantage of it. But you talk about a competitive, driven, motivated guy who no one really ever heard of before, it really speaks to his character as a competitor. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander every single morning is in that gym early, 8:30, 9 o'clock. He's working on his game. He's getting up shots. He understands team. The thing that's so impressive about him, he's the same guy every day. Comes in with a smile on his face, loves basketball, wants to be great. When you've got players like that, and now you've got coaches that are going to work with them, they're going to get better. The ones that are really challenging, I think, sometimes are players that are maybe really gifted or really talented that don't think they need to do those things and aren't really willing to put that kind of work and effort into it. Chris Paul at 35 years old, I told somebody this story. I'd never forget this. We were coming off a East Coast swing, and we got back. We played in a double overtime game against Brooklyn, and we landed back in Oklahoma at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And we had a game the next day. So I was in the office at like, I don't know, 5 or 6 o'clock. I was just trying to watch film and get prepared for the next day. And he calls me, and he's like, you know, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm in the office. I'm just watching film. I'm like, where are you? He says, I'm in the back. And I went in the back, and he was going back and forth at 7 o'clock at night between the cold tank and the sauna to try to get his body right for the next day. That's the kind of discipline and drive. Here he is, 35 years old, a first ballot Hall of Famer, and this guy is scratching for every inch he can get to get an advantage. His game's probably not going to change a whole lot, but you know what? The attention to detail in his body, his eating habits, how he hydrates. I mean, it's unbelievable to watch it. It's so impressive. And that's, you know, Chris is really talented. He's really bright and he's smart. But I don't think people talk enough about his internal drive of what he's trying to do to win. I mean, it's really remarkable. And I think when you find players like that, you're going to be putting them in positions to be really successful and develop. So it's got to be a combination of both. I think sometimes when a player doesn't develop, you know, it could be not the right opportunity, not the right style of play. It could be those things. But a lot of times if guys are young and they're talented, they really, really work, chances are they're going to really improve and get better.
I'm glad you used the word opportunity. That's what this was for us, to get a chance to sit down with you. And like I said, I've had a handful of interactions with you. I've always walked away impressed, and looking forward to this relationship. And I know fans are looking forward to having you as part of this organization. Billy, thanks for the time today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was great being on with you.
Hey, Bulls fans, thanks for watching. For more videos, just check them out right here.